There is a saying among my people, the Veth, that goes something like this: when the void speaks, do not answer. It is an old saying, a wise saying, a saying carved into the stone walls of our oldest temples and whispered by our eldest elders in the quietest hours of the night. Humans have never heard this saying, or maybe they have, and they simply do not care. I suspect it is the latter. My name is Gorr. I am a senior field observer for the Veth Galactic Enforcement Division, which is a very impressive title that comes with a very unimpressive salary, a uniform that chafes in places I will not describe, and a posting to the one sector of the known galaxy that every species with any self-preservation instinct avoids as though it radiates death, which, for the record, it does. The sector is called the Vrail Expanse. You do not need to know what lives there. You do not need to know what happened to the last 3 civilizations that tried to colonize it. You do not need to know why our cartographers simply write the words "do not" across the entire region and call it a day. What you need to know is this: it is the most dangerous, most unstable, most aggressively hostile stretch of space in the known galaxy. And somehow, impossibly, infuriatingly, the humans had parked a ship right in the middle of it. A small ship. A scratched-up, dented, clearly been through several catastrophes ship. The kind of ship that looks like it was assembled by someone who had seen a picture of a spaceship once, felt inspired, and then gave up halfway through. The hull had patches on it. Actual physical patches, like whoever built it had simply slapped metal over the holes and hoped for the best. It was sitting on the surface of Vrail 9, a planet so geologically unstable that even our probes had a survival rate of about 11%. It was just sitting there, calm, quiet, like it belonged. Nothing belongs on Vrail 9. Gorr, said Commander Eula's voice through my communicator, sharp and cold as she always was, always had been, probably always would be until she eventually died of sheer professional disapproval. Confirm what you are seeing. I was already confirming it. I did not want to be confirming it. It is a human vessel, I said. Silence. Then, say that again. It is a human vessel, Commander. Registration markings on the side read, I am spelling this phonetically. It appears to say rotten luck, with an apostrophe. More silence. Gorr. Yes, Commander. Are they alive? I checked my scanner. The readings came back. I stared at them. I checked again. The readings remained the same. I made a small sound that, in Veth culture, roughly translates to a combination of, I cannot believe this, and please let me retire. Somehow, I said, yes, life signs confirmed. 4 of them, active, moving around inside the ship. One of them appears to be cooking something. The silence this time lasted so long I genuinely wondered if the communicator had died. Cooking, Eula repeated. The thermal readings suggest heat application to organic matter. Yes, cooking, on Villanintrain, on Vrail 9, Commander. She made a sound I had never heard her make before. It was something between a groan and a prayer. In 15 years of working under Commander Eula, I had never once heard her make a sound like that. It told me everything I needed to know about how seriously she was taking this. I pulled my scout craft in closer, keeping my cloak active, keeping my distance, keeping every warning system on full alert. The surface of Vrail 9 trembled beneath my landing struts like a living thing, which, depending on which scientific theory you believed, it possibly was. I activated the external audio feed, because I am a professional, and professionals gather data, even when every single nerve in their body is screaming at them to leave. What I heard was music. I do not mean music in the broad, generous sense of the word. I mean it specifically. There was a speaker somewhere inside the rotten luck pumping out sound at a volume that would have violated noise ordinances on 17 different worlds. It had rhythm and what I can only describe as enthusiasm, and one of the humans was singing along to it, badly and without apparent shame. And then the ship's side hatch opened. I should tell you what the surface conditions of Vrail 9 are like so you understand what happened next and why it affected me the way it did. Vrail 9 has an atmosphere of approximately 40% sulfuric compound gases. Its surface temperature fluctuates between -60 and +300 degrees on a cycle that lasts about 2 of our standard hours. The ground itself is semi-liquid in places, solid in others, with no reliable way to tell which is which until you step on it. There are things that live in the upper soil layer. We do not know what they are. We know that they are large. We know that they are not friendly. We know this because of what they did to our probes. The hatch opened. A human stepped out. She was, by human standards, what I would later come to understand was considered average height, with dark hair pulled back from her face and an expression of complete comfortable confidence that absolutely no creature should be wearing on the surface of Vryle 9. She was wearing a jacket. It was not a hazard suit. It was not an environment suit. It was a jacket, with what appeared to be extra pockets sewn onto it by hand, because clearly the factory original number of pockets had been insufficient for her purposes. She stepped onto the ground of Vryle 9. She looked around. She put her hands on her hips. She said, loud enough for my audio feed to pick it up clearly, "Okay, Rook, you were right. This place is pretty bad." A voice from inside the ship called back, "I am always right, Sable, and nobody ever listens to me, and I want that on record." "It is on record," said Sable, the human woman standing on a planet that should have killed her 3 times already. "I am literally recording this." "Good," said Rook. "Play it back at my funeral. You are not going to die. We are on Vryle 9, Sable. We are on lots of places. Not like this place." She tilted her head to one side, looking out at the cracked, steaming landscape with what I can only describe as mild curiosity, the same expression one might wear while considering what to order for lunch. The ground near her left boot gurgled. A jet of something gaseous shot up from a fissure about 4 meters away. She watched it. She nodded slightly. She pulled a small notebook from one of her many pockets and wrote something in it. I was pressed flat against the inside of my cockpit, watching this through the viewport with both eyes wide and my secondary stress glands working at full capacity. Then the second human appeared in the hatchway. Rook was taller than Sable, with a face that communicated, even to someone unfamiliar with human expressions, that he was deeply unhappy about being here and had been deeply unhappy about being here since they arrived, and possibly since before they arrived, and possibly since the moment the idea was first suggested. He was wearing what I later learned humans call a work shirt, which was open at the collar and had stains on it that suggested he had been eating while also doing something mechanical, possibly simultaneously. He leaned against the hatchway. He said, "Scanner says there's a cave system about 3 kilometers northeast." Sable looked northeast. "That's where the signal's coming from?" "That's where the signal's coming from." "Then that's where we are going." Rook rubbed his face with both hands in a gesture I had come to understand, even with limited human exposure, meant something along the lines of, "I knew it would come to this." Then he disappeared back inside, and I heard him shouting to someone further in the ship whose name apparently was Petra, and telling Petra to gear up because they were going into the cave. Petra's response was enthusiastic. It echoed out through the hatch. I did not understand all the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Petra was excited. Petra wanted to go into the cave. Nobody should want to go into the cave. I knew what was in the cave. I knew because 3 of our probes had gotten close enough to transmit partial data before they stopped transmitting. The cave system on Vryle 9 was not a geological formation. It was not a natural occurrence. It was a structure. Something had built it, a very long time ago, and whatever that something was, the partial data from our probes suggested it was not gone, not entirely. There were readings, there were patterns, there were things in that data set that our scientists had reviewed, gone very quiet, and then filed under a classification level that I, as a senior field observer, was not supposed to have access to. I had access to it. I had access to it because my good friend and colleague Pri, a research analyst with truly spectacular judgment, had sent it to me one evening with the message, "You should know about this before your deployment. Here is the file. Also do not tell anyone I sent you this." And what the file told me was that the cave on Vryle 9 was not merely a structure. It was a weapon. Specifically, it was a weapon built by a civilization called the Drain, who had existed roughly 800,000 years before any current galactic civilization had achieved technology so advanced it still defied our best attempts at analysis, and had then vanished so completely and so suddenly that our best current theory was that they had somehow caused their own extinction through the use of this very weapon. The humans were going to walk into it in hiking boots. One of them was apparently still cooking breakfast. I pressed my communicator button with a sense of profound duty warring against an equally profound desire to simply fly away and never speak of this again. "Commander Eula," I said. "Report," she said. "The humans have exited their vessel. They are preparing to move toward the cave structure in Grid 9 Alpha." The silence was different this time, tighter, sharper. "Gorr," she said, "that structure is a drain installation." "I am aware, Commander. If they activate anything in there—" "I am aware, Commander. You need to stop them." I looked at the humans through my viewport. Sable was making notes. Rook had returned with equipment. There was now a third human, who had to be Petra. A shorter figure with what appeared to be several scanning devices strapped to a vest over their clothing, moving with the quick, purposeful energy of someone who found all of this genuinely delightful. And a fourth hanging back near the hatch, arms crossed, watching the landscape with eyes that moved slowly and carefully in a way that set off a different kind of alarm in me entirely. That one I had not heard named yet. That one was watching the way predators watch. "Commander," I said, "I am one operative, with a scout craft and a field sidearm. I am aware of your resources, Gorr. The humans have a ship named Rotten Luck, and one of them is finishing breakfast. Your point?" "My point," I said carefully, "is that I am not sure how I am supposed to stop 4 humans who have voluntarily landed on Varel 9 from doing anything they have already decided to do." Another long silence. "Make contact," said Eula. "Tell them the truth about the installation. Show them the classification file if you have to." I did not tell her I already had the classification file. "And if they proceed anyway?" I asked. She sighed. It was a sound like pressure releasing from a sealed container. "Then you proceed with them and minimize the damage. And Gorr, Commander, try not to get killed. I will add it to my list of priorities." She disconnected. I looked at my reflection in the dark viewport screen. I looked tired. I had been looking tired for approximately the past 6 years. I put on my environment suit, checked my sidearm, checked it again because once is never enough on Varel 9, and then I opened my own hatch and stepped out onto a planet that hated me. The heat hit first, then the smell, which is not a smell I will attempt to describe because no description would do it justice, and also because I have some respect for whoever might be reading this account later. The ground shifted slightly under my feet. Something moved in my peripheral vision, deep in a crack in the earth, something large that decided I was not worth the effort, and moved on. I walked toward the humans. Sable saw me first. She stopped writing in her notebook. She looked at me with an expression that was curious and alert, and not at all afraid, which told me a great deal about Sable, and none of it was particularly reassuring. "Hello," she said. I stopped about 4 meters away, which felt like a reasonable distance for a first contact situation that I had not prepared for, been briefed on, or in any way wanted. "Hello," I said, through my suit's translator. My voice came out somewhat flat, as translators often make it, but clear enough. "I need you to listen to me carefully." "Sure," said Sable. Rook, behind her, had gone very still in the way that large animals go still when they are deciding something. He had not reached for anything. He was simply watching me with an attention that felt like a weight. Petra had turned around and was pointing a scanner at me, making small sounds of excitement. The fourth one, the quiet one, had not moved at all. "I am Gorr," I said, "Senior Field Observer, Veth Enforcement Division. This planet is in a restricted sector. You are not supposed to be here." "Yeah," said Sable, "we get that a lot. I imagine you do. The structure you are intending to enter is a Drayan installation. Do you know what that means?" "It means it was built by the Drayan," said Petra helpfully, still scanning me. "It means," I said, with more patience than I was genuinely feeling, "that it is approximately 800,000 years old, that it contains technology we do not understand, and that our best available evidence suggests it is a weapon of sufficient power to destabilize this entire sector. The species that built it used it on themselves. They are gone. The weapon is not." Silence. I felt a small bloom of hope. Perhaps this would work. Perhaps the direct approach would work. Sable looked at Rook. Rook looked at Sable. Petra was writing something down. The quiet one still had not moved. "How big a weapon?" said Rook. I blinked. "I beg your pardon? You said it could destabilize the sector. The sector is big. Are we talking about a destabilization event that affects a few star systems, or are we talking about something that affects the whole expanse?" I stared at him. "Because," he continued completely seriously, "that changes the approach. It changes the approach to going in there." I turned to Sable because she seemed marginally like the most grounded member of this group. "Are you seriously still considering entering the installation?" "We picked up a signal," she said. "I know you picked up a signal. The signal is why the installation is dangerous. It is activating." "Right," said Sable. "So if it is activating on its own, then it is going to do the destabilization thing, whether we go in there or not, correct?" I opened my mouth. I closed it. I opened it again. "Technically," I said, hating every word. "Yes, so going in there and doing something about it is better than not going in there and letting it do the thing. We do not know that you can do something about it. We do not know anyone can do something about it. We won't know until we look," she said, and she said it with such complete, simple, practical logic that I briefly felt like the unreasonable one. What's your read on the timeline? If it is activating, how long do we have? I checked my scanner against my will. Based on current emission patterns, 11 hours approximately, perhaps 12. Plenty of time, she said, with a confidence that made me want to sit down on the ground and simply stay there. To Sable. This was Rook. His voice was different now, flatter, more serious. He was looking at me. Not at Sable. At me. The Veth know about this installation. They have known about it. Why haven't they done anything? It was a very good question. It was the question, actually. And the answer was the kind of answer that is technically true and also deeply embarrassing for everyone involved. Because, I said, after the probe data, our leadership assessed the risk of any crew entering the installation as prohibitively high. The probability of success was calculated at, I checked the numbers I had memorized from Pre's file. 3.1%. 3%, said Rook. 3.1. He nodded slowly. That's actually higher than I expected. That is a spectacularly worrying thing to say. 3% means it has been done before, said Sable. 3% means there is an extremely small mathematical chance that it is survivable, which means someone survived. The math does not mean someone survived. The math means the probability is not zero. There is a difference between a non-zero probability and a precedent for success. Gorr, said Sable, and she said my name with such easy familiarity as though we had known each other for years rather than approximately 4 minutes on the surface of a planet that wanted to kill us both. What is your actual job here? What were you sent to do? I breathed. I was sent to observe and to make contact, and to prevent you from entering the installation if possible. And if not possible, to accompany you and minimize the damage. She smiled. It was a warm smile. I understood, distantly, why humans smile, but I had never had one directed at me quite like that, with quite that degree of certainty, as though everything was already going to be fine, and I had simply not been informed yet. Then you are coming with us, she said. I was afraid you would say that. I said, I'm Sable Voss, by the way, she said. This is Rook Harlan. You already met Petra, sort of. The quiet one is Colt Maves. He doesn't say much until it matters, and then you really want to listen. I looked at Colt Maves. He was looking back at me with eyes the color of deep water, calm and measuring. Hello? I said. Gorr, he said. Just my name. Just acknowledging me, as though he was filing me under a category and he had not yet decided which one. I decided right then that Colt Maves was either going to be very useful or very terrifying. Possibly both, which in my experience tends to be the case with the most interesting people. There is a fourth member of your crew, I said. The thermal signatures from your ship indicated 4 life signs. Oh, that's Brix, said Rook. Brix is still eating, said Petra. Brix is always eating, said Sable. Brix will catch up, said Rook, with the particular tone of someone who has said this many times before. Your crew member is still eating breakfast, I said, on Vrel 9, while a drain weapon is activating 3 kilometers away. Brix says breakfast is non-negotiable, said Sable. Honestly, at this point, I agree with him. You fight better when you are not hungry. I looked at the cave in the distance. I looked at these 4 humans who had landed here because they heard a signal that every other species in the galaxy had chosen, wisely, to ignore. I looked at my scanner, which was showing me the emission readings from the installation growing steadily, measurably, undeniably stronger. Fine, I said. We move in 15 minutes. That should give Brix time to finish. He is a fast eater, said Rook. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Great, said Sable, already walking back toward the ship. Come inside. I will make you something too. I do not eat human food. You haven't tried it. I am certain that is true, and I am equally certain it is going to remain true. Suit yourself, she said, not particularly bothered, and climbed back up into the ship. I stood on the surface of Vrel 9. A tremor moved through the ground. Somewhere in the distance, something large screamed very briefly and then stopped. The sky above me was a color that I do not think any language has a proper word for, a bruised, angry purple-green that pulsed at the edges where the upper atmosphere was already being affected by the installation's output. In 10 minutes I was going to walk into a Drayan weapons facility with 4 humans, one of whom was finishing breakfast, one of whom was scanning everything including me with evident joy, one of whom had the personality of a careful predator, and one of whom had already named me as part of the team with a smile that left no room for argument. I pressed my communicator button. Commander Eula. Gorr. Status. I made contact. I said. I explained the situation in full. I conveyed the danger. I presented the data. And I am going into the cave. A very long pause. Gorr, she said, when you said minimize the damage. I am minimizing the damage, Commander. The alternative is they go in without me. Are they truly going in? Commander, I said, they landed on Vrail 9 because they heard a signal. They are going in. The sound she made this time was new. I had never heard it before. It was soft and tired and carried the weight of someone who had at some point in their career stopped being surprised by things and moved directly into a state of permanent, weary acceptance. Keep your communicator open, she said. I want everything recorded. Understood, Commander. And Gorr? Commander, this is either going to be the worst thing that has ever happened, or… She trailed off. Or what? I asked. She did not answer for a moment. When she did, her voice was careful. 3.1%, she said. That is what our people calculated. What do you calculate? I looked at the ship. Through the hatch I could hear sounds, voices, something clattering. The music had come back on, softer now. Someone laughed, brief and easy, the laugh of people who are comfortable with each other and with what they are about to do, not because they do not understand the risk, but because they have made their peace with risk in a way that my people, quite frankly, have not. What did I calculate? I thought about Sable Voss, standing on this planet with her hands on her hips, looking at a landscape that hated her and writing notes in a little book. I thought about Rook Harlan, whose first question about a civilization-ending weapon was how big a destabilization event we were talking about, because it changed the approach. I thought about Petra, who was excited. I thought about Colt Maves, who watched everything with those calm, deep-water eyes. I thought about Brix, whom I had not met yet, who was eating breakfast. Somewhere, I said to my commander slowly, between 3.1 and considerably higher. She made a sound that might, in very dim light and with generous interpretation, have almost been a laugh. Come back alive, she said, and disconnected. I walked toward the rotten luck. Brix turned out to be a broad-shouldered human with a face that looked like it had been through several arguments with the physical world and had come out of each one with a slightly different opinion. He was sitting on a crate inside the ship with a container of something hot and eating with focused, professional dedication. He looked up at me when I entered, studied me for exactly 2 seconds, nodded once and returned to eating. That's Gorr, said Petra, who was reorganizing their vest pockets. He is Veth. He is coming with us. Good, said Brix without looking up. Extra eyes are good in cave systems. You have been in many cave systems? I asked. A few, said Brix. Dangerous ones? He seemed to consider this. Define dangerous. I looked around the interior of the rotten luck. It was cramped and organized in the specific way of people who have lived in a small space for a long time and have developed their own logic for where things go. A logic that would be incomprehensible to an outsider but that clearly made sense to them. The walls had things attached to them, tools, equipment, small objects that seemed personal rather than practical. There was a piece of paper pinned near the door that had words on it in human script that my translator rendered as, "If you can read this, you survived another one." These people had survived enough things that they had made a sign about it. In Veth, I said to the room, to no one in particular, we have a cultural concept. It roughly translates as, the awareness of the end of things, the understanding that death exists, and that our actions must account for it. Sure, said Rook, checking something in a bag. We have that too. You have that too. I repeated. Everybody has that, he said. The question is what you do with it. And what do you do with it? He looked up. He met my eyes, or the part of my face that functions as eyes, and the look was entirely level and entirely serious. We do the thing anyway, he said, because if we don't, someone else gets hurt, and we happen to be here, and that's enough. Sable had appeared in the doorway of a side compartment, holding something and listening. That's the whole philosophy, she said. We happen to be here, so we go. I stood in the middle of their ship, on a planet that had no business hosting anyone, with a weapons installation 3 kilometers away counting down to something catastrophic, and I thought about what it was like to be Veth, to run calculations, to assess probability, to file things under classification levels and decide based on numbers what was worth attempting and what was not. 3.1%. And then I thought about what it was like to hear a signal and land on Vrail 9, because you happened to be nearby and you thought you might be able to help. All right, said Brix, setting his empty container aside and standing up. Let's go see what the old dead things left behind. The old dead things, I said, left behind a weapon. "Then let's go see what kind," said Bricks, like this was a perfectly reasonable way to describe a field trip. He looked at me with something that was not quite a smile and not quite a challenge. "You coming or not, Gorr? I am a senior field observer for the Veth Galactic Enforcement Division. I have been in this job for 15 years. I have followed protocols, filed reports, maintained safe distances, and assessed risks within acceptable parameters for my entire career." "Yes," I said, "I am coming." And we walked out into Vrail 9, all 6 of us, toward a cave that should not exist, built by a species that had erased themselves, housing a weapon that had been slowly waking up for God knows how long, while the sky above us turned a color that no language had a proper word for. The ground shifted under our feet. Somewhere deep below, something old and vast and terribly patient stirred, and Petra said, with complete and genuine wonder, "Oh wow, look at those crystalline formations in the rock face." Everyone looked. They were beautiful, actually. If you were the kind of person who could appreciate beauty on a planet that was actively trying to kill you, they were genuinely beautiful. I was starting to think that might be a very specific skill, and that these humans had it in abundance. We walked on. The cave entrance did not look like an entrance. That was the first thing I noticed, and I want to be precise about it because precision matters when you are describing the place where you nearly died, and where several other people nearly died, and where the known galaxy nearly became significantly smaller and quieter. The entrance did not look like a door or an opening, or any kind of intentional architectural feature. It looked like the ground had simply cracked open at some point in the past 800,000 years and forgotten to close. A long split in the rock, wide enough for us to walk through sideways, exhaling. The edges were smooth, not in the way that erosion makes things smooth, but in the way that intent makes things smooth. Deliberately shaped, deliberately disguised. The Draen had not wanted anyone to find this place easily. That was not comforting. "Scanner readings," said Sable, not to me but to Petra, who had 3 different devices running simultaneously and the expression of someone who had just been handed everything they had ever wanted for a birthday present. "Dense," said Petra. "Really dense. The walls have metallic compound running through them. Some kind of alloy I cannot identify. It is interfering with depth mapping. I can tell there is a lot of space inside. I cannot tell exactly how much." "A lot of space," said Rook, "is a scientific measurement I am fully satisfied with. I can get more precise if you give me about 40 minutes and a portable resonance emitter." "We do not have 40 minutes, I said. My scanner was showing the emission patterns from the installation in steady pulses now, each one fractionally stronger than the last. "Based on current escalation, I would revise my earlier estimate. We have closer to 9 hours now. We lost 2 hours to breakfast," said Rook, looking at Bricks. "I did not eat for 2 hours, said Bricks. "It felt like 2 hours. It felt like 2 hours because you were anxious, and anxiety distorts time perception. I ate for 22 minutes, I timed it." "You timed your breakfast." "I always time my breakfast. You would know this if you paid attention." I looked at Colt Maves, who was standing at the edge of the crack in the rock, looking in. Not scanning, not talking, looking, with those careful, patient eyes that moved in slow, deliberate passes across everything they touched. "What do you see?" I asked him. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Light, down low, not our light, something else." I checked my scanner. He was right. There was a faint bioluminescent signature coming from deep inside, a soft, steady pulse that matched the emission pattern from the installation almost exactly, like a heartbeat, like something breathing. "The installation is lit," I said, mostly to myself, because the implications of that were large and I needed a moment to process them. "It has been dormant for 800,000 years, and it is now lit from the inside." "That's either very bad or very useful," said Sable. "How would it be useful?" "We will not need torches," she said, and stepped sideways through the crack in the rock. Rook followed her. Petra followed Rook, still scanning. Bricks paused at the entrance and looked at me with an expression that I was beginning to recognize as his default face, a kind of settled, uncomplicated readiness, and said, "You go first or second to last?" "What is the tactical logic of that choice?" I asked. "Second to last means Colt's behind you. Nothing gets past Colt without announcing itself." I looked at Colt Maves, who had not moved from the edge of the entrance, still watching the inside with his slow, careful eyes. "Second to last," I said. Bricks nodded and went in. I followed. Colt came last, and I noticed, without being able to fully explain why, that when he entered the cave my sense of the space behind me settled in a way it had not before. Something about his presence was inherently reassuring in a manner I could not quantify. It was not his size, he was not particularly large. It was not his visible equipment, though he had some. It was something in the quality of his attention, the sense that nothing was going to approach from behind without him knowing it first. I filed this under the category of useful things I had not expected to be grateful for today. The inside of the cave stopped being a cave almost immediately. 3 meters in, the rock walls gave way to something else. The transition was abrupt enough that even knowing intellectually what this place was, I still felt my steps slow involuntarily. The material was dark, not black exactly, but a deep color that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, smooth to the point of appearing liquid, and warm. That was the detail that stopped me. The walls were warm. After the freezing surface temperature of Vral 9, the interior of this place was warm and still and breathable. Atmosphere inside is different, I said, checking my scanner. Composition is close to standard breathable range, significantly warmer. The installation is maintaining it, said Petra. It has climate controls, still running after 800,000 years. A pause. Then, with reverence, the engineering. The engineering, I agreed quietly, is extraordinary, and I meant it. Even with the threat, even with the weight of what this place was, the fact that any technology could maintain functional environmental controls for 800,000 years was worth pausing on. The light Colt had seen from outside was more visible now. It came from the floor, long strips of it, embedded in the material, running ahead of us down a corridor that curved gently to the right, soft and blue-white, pulsing once every 4 seconds with mechanical precision. It looks like a runway, said Rook. Leading us somewhere, said Sable. Leading us somewhere, I confirmed, is almost certainly intentional. The question is whether the intention is benign. 800,000-year-old alien weapons facility, said Brix, rolling his shoulders. Historically, does benign show up often? Historically, I said, nothing this old is still running, so we have no comparison set. First time for everything, said Brix, entirely too cheerfully, and walked down the corridor. We followed the light. The corridor widened gradually, over perhaps 200 meters, from a passage that required single-file movement into something that could comfortably hold all 6 of us walking side by side with room to spare. The ceiling rose with it. The pulse of the floor lights remained constant. 4 seconds, 4 seconds, 4 seconds. I kept checking my scanner. The emission readings were growing, but not sharply. There was a pattern to the growth, a mathematical progression that my scanner could track but could not predict the end of. Not yet, Gorr, said Sable, walking beside me. Her voice was low, not quite a whisper. The volume you use when you are not sure if a space is listening but you are not willing to fully assume it is not. Talk to me about the Dryan. What would you like to know? What were they like, as a species? I thought about what was in Pre's file. The file had been mostly technical, instrument readings, structural analysis, energy signatures, but there had been a section, a small one, written by a xenoarchaeologist whose name I had not retained, that had tried to describe what could be inferred about the Drain from what they left behind. Advanced beyond current understanding, I said, which is a phrase that is technically accurate and also practically meaningless, because every level of technology is advanced beyond something, so calling something beyond current understanding mostly means we have run out of frame of reference. They worked in energy states that our science does not fully have language for yet. They did not, as far as we can tell, communicate the way most species communicate. The xenoarchaeologist in our records suggested they may have communicated directly through the energy systems they used, the way that some biological species communicate through touch, but on a much larger scale. So the weapon, said Sable slowly, might not be entirely mechanical. I looked at her. What makes you say that? Because if they talked through their technology, she said, and this is their technology, then maybe the weapon has left something behind. Some kind of record, some kind of message. The emission pattern, said Petra from behind us. He had apparently been listening. It is not random escalation. There is patterning in it. I have been running it through a frequency analysis since we landed. It looks like repetition, like something being said more than once, louder each time. Everyone stopped walking. I looked at Petra. Petra looked at me. The look that passed between us was the specific look of 2 people who have just simultaneously arrived at the same conclusion, and neither of them particularly wanted to be right. It is not activating, I said. No, said Petra. It is signaling. Yes. Silence. The floor pulsed. Blue-white. 4 seconds. Signaling what? Said Rook. Or to whom? said Colt Maves, from the back of the group. It was the second time he had spoken since we entered the planet's atmosphere. Everyone turned to look at him. He was looking ahead down the corridor, with an expression that was precisely calibrated and impossible to read. Something heard it. Something came. We came, said Sable. We came, said Colt, but we were not the first thing to hear it. My scanner chose that moment to update its readings, and the data that came back made me stand very still for several seconds, because Colt Maves was correct. The emission pattern, when I looked at it now through the lens of signaling rather than activation, showed a clear response-receive-repeat structure. It had been broadcasting for some time, and something had been responding to it. Something was in this facility. Something that was not us. Gorr, said Rook. He had gone to the same stillness he had gone to on the surface when he first saw me, that large animal readiness that was not aggression but was adjacent to it in the way that a door is adjacent to a wall. There is a presence, I said, keeping my voice flat and informative, and not at all the other things it wanted to be. Biological. Single signature. Approximately 50 meters further down the corridor. It is not moving. It knows we are here, said Sable. It has almost certainly known since we entered, but it is not moving toward us. No. Or away from us. No. She considered this, then it is waiting. That is the most reasonable interpretation of stationary behavior. Yes. What species? Said Brix. I checked the scanner, checked it again, felt something extremely unfamiliar move through me, something that I did not have a precise word for in Veth, and that my translator, when I reached for language, rendered somewhat inadequately as astonishment edging toward alarm. I cannot determine species, I said. The biological signature is present. It is alive, but the readings around it are, I paused, integrated with the installation systems, the way Petra's alloy is integrated with the rock walls. Whatever is in there, it has been here for a very long time, and this place has grown around it, or into it. Silence settled over us like something physical. Then Sable said, "All right, we go talk to it." "We go talk to it," I repeated. "Do you have a better idea?" I thought about this seriously. I thought about it for a full 10 seconds while the floor pulsed and the corridor waited, and 50 meters away something 800,000 years old sat and breathed and waited. "No," I said, "I do not have a better idea." "Good," she said. "Stay close, everyone. Gorr, translate if you can. Petra, record everything. Rook, Brix." She did not finish the sentence for Rook and Brix. She did not need to. Both of them shifted slightly, a positioning thing, a way of moving that was subtle and smooth, and spoke to how many times they had done exactly this, walked toward an unknown thing, and arranged themselves around it so that the people who needed to think could think without worrying about what was behind them. Colt was already behind me. We walked 50 meters. The corridor opened into a chamber. The chamber was large, very large. The ceiling was so far above us that the light from the floor strips barely touched it, and what I could see of it gave me the impression of vast, careful architecture, supports and curves and angles that were not decorative but structural, the skeleton of something built to last across time so long it made my head feel strange when I tried to hold it. In the center of the chamber was a platform. On the platform was what I can only describe, after significant struggle with vocabulary, as a presence. It was not large. Physically, it was no bigger than Brix, crouched on the platform in a posture that suggested it had been sitting in roughly this position for a very long time and had made its peace with that. It was roughly bilateral, 2 upper limbs, 2 lower, a central mass. But the details of it were wrong for any species in my databanks, because the details of it were not entirely there. The edges of it blurred slightly where they met the platform surface. The material of the platform had grown up around it, or it had grown into the platform, and where they met both looked the same. The floor in the chamber pulsed differently, faster, responding to our presence. The thing on the platform opened its eyes, or what served as eyes. 2 points of light, the same blue-white as the floor strips, the same frequency, the same pulse, 4 seconds, then 4 seconds, then 4. My translator found absolutely nothing to work with. I tried twice, 3 times. The device ran its pattern-matching algorithms against every language in its database and came back empty. Then Petra said quietly, "The emission pattern, the signal it was broadcasting, it is the same frequency as those eyes." "It is the same frequency," I said slowly, "as the weapon's activation sequence." "Except," said Petra, "it is not an activation sequence." "No," I said, "it is a language. We stood there in the vast quiet of the chamber and looked at something that had been alone for 800,000 years and had been sending out the same message the entire time, repeating it and repeating it and repeating it and repeating it, louder and louder as its power sources shifted and aged and changed, until the signal was strong enough to reach across restricted space and pull in anyone close enough to hear it. I looked at Sable. She was looking at the presence on the platform with an expression I had not yet seen on her face, not the practical readiness she wore on the surface, not the focused calm of the corridor, something older and softer and more careful than either of those. It called for help, she said. That is one interpretation, I said. It is the right interpretation, she said, with the certainty of someone who has looked at a thing and understood it the way you understand things that are more felt than analyzed. The eyes on the platform pulsed. 4 seconds. Can we answer it? She asked. In its language, I said, not without a translation matrix we do not have. In our language, it will not understand. It might understand the intention, said Colt Maves. He stepped forward. Not fast, not slow. He walked past me, past Sable, toward the platform, with the same deliberate care he had applied to everything since I met him. He stopped at the edge of the platform, 3 meters from the presence, and he looked at it. The eyes followed him. 4 seconds. He crouched down so that he was no longer standing over it but level with it, meeting those light point eyes at their own height. And then he did something that I have thought about many times since and cannot fully explain and am not sure I need to. He placed one hand flat on the platform surface, open, palm down, next to where the presence sat, not touching it, not reaching for it, simply offering the contact. Making himself present in the same space, saying without words, in the most basic physical grammar of a living thing, I am here, I see you, I am not leaving. The chamber was completely silent. Then the platform pulsed. Not a 4-second pulse, a long one, sustained, like a held breath releasing. The blue-white light ran from under Colt's hand in every direction across the platform, spreading to the floor strips, running up to the ceiling in threads I had not noticed were there, filling the entire chamber with a soft, even, breathable light. And the emission readings on my scanner began to drop. I looked at the numbers. I looked at them again. I increased the reading precision to make sure I was not misinterpreting the data. It is de-escalating, I said. My voice came out smaller than I intended. The weapon cycle, it is reversing. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Rook said, very quietly, because it was never activating a weapon. No, I said. It was just trying to get loud enough for someone to hear it. Yes. And now someone heard it. Yes. The thing on the platform made a sound. It was not language, not in any form my translator could work with, but it was unmistakably a sound of intention, something communicated, something meant. Colt Maves did not move his hand from the platform. He looked at the presence steadily and nodded once, a small, slow dip of his head. The presence looked at him. Then it looked at the rest of us, moving those light point eyes from face to face with deliberate, unhurried attention, taking inventory, seeing us, and I had the very specific sensation, unusual in my professional experience, of being seen not as a threat or an obstacle or a variable in someone else's calculation, but simply as a living thing that had arrived and was noted, and was found to be adequate to the moment. Petra had tears on their face. I noticed this and found I had no useful comment to make about it, so I said nothing, which in retrospect was probably the right call. What happens now? Said Brix. I do not know, I said. Does it need something? Can we help it? I genuinely do not know, Brix. Can we get it off the platform? Can we take it some? I checked my scanner. The integration readings were still there. The biological signature still blurred into the platform material at the edges. I do not know if it is able to be separated from the installation at this point. The integration is profound. 800,000 years is a very long time. Could we move the installation? Said Petra. I looked at them. The installation is a complex of at least several structures embedded in the geology of an actively unstable planet. I said, could we, not would we. No, we could not. Okay, said Petra, in the tone of someone crossing something off a list. Then what can we do? Sable had moved closer to the platform while we talked. She was standing near Colt now, not crouching, just standing, watching the presence with her notebook in her hand, not writing in it, just holding it. Then she looked at me. The signal, she said, it was broadcasting a signal for 800,000 years. On what frequency? I told her. She looked at Petra. Standard monitoring range? Close, said Petra. With a slight boost, Yes, any long-range scanner in this sector would pick it up. How many listening posts does the Veth Enforcement Division maintain in the Vrail Expanse? She said. She said this to me. I thought about it, I knew the answer. I knew the answer because I had memorized our sector infrastructure during my pre-deployment briefing, the same briefing in which the cave on Vrel 9 had been described as approach inadvisable, threat level maximum, no further investigation planned. 7, I said. 7 listening posts, she said, and none of them were tuned to this frequency. No, because the sector was marked off limits. Yes. So the signal has been broadcasting for 800,000 years and nobody heard it because everyone decided not to look. The words landed in the quiet chamber and stayed there. I am a senior field observer for the Veth Galactic Enforcement Division. I have spent 15 years following protocols and assessing risks and maintaining safe distances. I am very good at my job. And standing in that chamber, looking at a thing that had been alone since before my species had learned to build ships, I felt the particular discomfort of being a professional in a moment that makes professionalism feel very small. The 7 listening posts, I said, measuring each word, can be recalibrated. I have the authorization codes for remote adjustment. I can do it from my scout craft. You would do that without clearance from Commander Eula. Commander Eula told me to minimize damage. I paused. I am making an interpretive decision about what that means. Sable almost smiled. Not quite. There was too much weight in the room for a full smile. But almost. If the listening posts are tuned to this frequency, she said, the Enforcement Division will pick up the signal directly. Yes. And then someone will have to respond to it. Yes. Officially, yes. And whatever this place is, whatever this individual is, they will be on record. They will be documented. They will be known about. She looked at the presence on the platform. You cannot unknow something that is on record. No, I said, you cannot. She nodded. Then do it. I pressed my communicator. Commander Eula. Her voice came back immediately, which told me she had been listening the whole time, as I had known she would be. Gorr, I need remote authorization codes for listening post frequency adjustment. All 7 stations in the Vrail Expanse. A pause. Not a long one. What frequency? She said. I gave it to her. Another pause. Shorter. Transmitting codes now, she said. I heard her breathing on the other end of the communicator as I put the adjustment through, station by station. 7 listening posts, 7 quiet changes that would, from this point forward, have the Veth Enforcement Division receiving, recording, and officially unable to ignore the signal from Vril 9. When the last one confirmed, Eula said, Gorr. Commander, what did you find in there? I looked at the presence on the platform. It was still watching us. Its eyes pulsed with the same rhythm as the floor, the walls, the entire installation around us, one long, slow, steady heartbeat. Colt still had his hand flat on the platform. The presence had, at some point in the last several minutes, moved slightly, shifted its weight in a direction that brought it fractionally closer to that open palm. Not touching. Not yet. But closer. Commander, I said, I believe I found the reason the Drain built this installation. The weapon? It is not a weapon, I said. Or rather, it is not only a weapon. It was built to do what the Dran built most of their large infrastructure to do, to communicate. This one was built to reach very far, and to last very long, because the message it was carrying needed to survive everything else. What message? I looked at the presence. I thought about 800,000 years. I thought about a signal going out into the dark, over and over, patient and steady and never stopping even when nothing answered. I thought about what it would take to build something designed to outlast yourself, to send a message forward across all the time between your existence and whoever came next. We will know more once our researchers have access, I said. But my current assessment is that the message was a relatively simple one. I paused. We were here. We existed. We are asking if anyone can hear us. The silence from the communicator lasted a long time. Then Eula said, I am filing a Priority 1 reclassification request for Verlan. The sector restriction will need to be reviewed. Yes, Commander. This is going to be a significant amount of paperwork, Gorr. Yes, Commander. The Galactic Council is going to have questions. Yes, Commander. There will be committee reviews. There will be oversight hearings. There will be other species involved, all of them with strong opinions and very little patience for each other. I imagine so, Commander. And all of this, she said, and her voice had a quality I had never heard in it before. Something careful and quiet and perhaps a little undone, started because a ship called Rotten Luck heard a signal that everyone else decided not to listen for. That is an accurate summary of events. She made the sound again, the one from earlier, the one that was not quite a laugh and not quite a prayer. This time it lasted a little longer. Tell the humans, she said, that I would like to speak with them, officially, at their earliest convenience. Shall I warn them that it will likely be formal? No, said Eula, and something dry and sharp moved through her voice. Let them show up as they are. I suspect that is more useful anyway. She disconnected. I lowered my communicator. Brix was looking at me. We in trouble? Quite the opposite, I said. Huh, said Brix. He seemed to consider this. First time for everything. Rook had moved to stand near Petra, who was still recording, still scanning, occasionally wiping their face with the back of one hand in a way that suggested they were trying to look more composed than they actually felt. Rook put a hand on Petra's shoulder, briefly, and said nothing, which turned out to be the right thing. Sable was still watching the presence on the platform. She had put her notebook away. She was just standing there looking, with the kind of quiet that is not absence but presence, the kind of quiet that is its own form of company. Do you think it understands, she said, not to anyone specifically, to the room. Understands what? I said. That we heard it, that we came, that things are going to be different now. I considered this carefully. The emission readings on my scanner had continued to drop, steadily, measurably, with the same mathematical precision that the escalation had shown, but now in reverse, not crashing down all at once, but descending like something that was not in a hurry anymore. Something that had all the time it needed now, because it was no longer alone. I think, I said, that it has understood that for the past several minutes, since Colt put his hand on the platform, we all looked at Colt. Colt was still crouched at the edge of the platform. The presence had shifted again, slightly, still not touching, but the distance between them was smaller than it had been, and the light from the floor ran in threads toward Colt's hand and seemed in a way that my scanner measured as a measurable increase in electrical surface activity to cluster there. Colt looked over his shoulder at us. It wants to know about us, he said. How do you know that? Said Rook. Because that is what I would want, said Colt, if I had been alone for 800,000 years and someone finally came through the door. Nobody had anything to add to that. Then let's tell it about us, said Sable. She walked forward and sat down cross-legged on the floor in front of the platform, which was exactly the kind of thing Sable Voss would do and which I had, in the short time I had known her, already entirely come to expect. She looked at the presence looked at her. She said, My name is Sable Voss. We came because we heard you. No translation, no technology, just words in a language that nothing here could parse, in a tone that carried everything the words could not. The eyes pulsed. 4 seconds. And then they pulsed again at 3. And then at 2. And then they held, steady, bright, even, sustained, like the long-held breath from before, but this time without the quality of release. Like something that had been waiting and was now simply present, simply here. In the light of that changed pulse, I saw something I had not noticed before. On the walls of the chamber, in the material that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, there were shapes, carved or grown or pressed in through some method I did not have vocabulary for. They covered the walls from floor to the ceiling I could not see the top of. Rows and rows and rows of them. I raised my scanner. Patterns. The same repeating pattern in different configurations. Not language or not language alone. Something else. Something I did not immediately understand and then did, all at once, the way you understand things that hit you sideways and then are suddenly, obviously, completely clear. Roads, I said. Petra appeared at my elbow, already scanning the walls. Records of what? All of it, I said. Everything. This is not just a communication installation, it is an archive. I walked slowly toward the nearest wall, scanner raised, reading as I went. These are Drain records, their history, their science, I paused, their understanding of what they built, and why, and what went wrong. Why it went wrong, said Sable. Why it went wrong, I confirmed. My scanner was reading faster than I could process, data stacking up in the buffer for later analysis. They knew what they had done. They built this to say so, to leave the record, so that whoever came next could know, so that whoever came next would not make the same mistake, said Rook. That would be the optimistic interpretation. I am going with the optimistic interpretation, said Rook. Given that you landed on Vrail 9 in a ship with a concerning name, I said, I am not surprised. He made a sound that was clearly a laugh, short and genuine, and in the vast quiet chamber it sounded both wrong and exactly right. Petra was scanning walls now with a focus that had elevated from excited to something I could only call reverent. They moved along the chamber's edge with careful steps, recording everything, occasionally making sounds under their breath that were not words so much as exclamations too small to be properly formed. Brix had moved to stand near the chamber entrance, watching the corridor we had come from, because Brix was, I was realizing, the kind of person who maintains situational awareness even in the middle of something extraordinary, and I understood suddenly why Sable Voss kept him around and why she trusted him. My scanner pinged. A new reading. Something had changed in the emission pattern, a shift I had not predicted, and for one sharp second everything in me went cold. Then I read the data more carefully. The installation is completing a cycle, I said. Not escalating, completing. There is a sequence it was moving through, and we are at the end of it. What happens at the end? Said Sable, very carefully. Based on the architecture of the sequence and the archive around us, I said, reading as fast as I could, putting it together in real time. I believe the installation has a designed terminal state, a final phase. What it was always meant to reach if contact was ever made, which is preservation mode, I said, low-power maintenance state, long-term stable operation. I looked up from my scanner. It was designed to do exactly this, broadcast until heard, record until accessed, then hold, at minimum sustainable power, until the contact could return with more resources and more people and proper time. The weight of that sat in the air between all of us. 800,000 years of broadcasting, of being patient in a way that went so far beyond any patience I had ever conceptualized that the word barely fit, of holding everything, every record, every piece of what the drain had been, waiting for someone to come through the door and say, "My name is Sable Voss, and we came because we heard you." They trusted that someone would come, said Sable. They trusted that enough to build for it. I said, that is an incredible amount of faith in the universe, or an incredible stubbornness about not being forgotten, said Rook. Maybe both, said Sable. The eyes on the platform held their steady, sustained light. I thought about the word trust. I thought about the word faith. I thought about what it meant to be a species that builds a structure designed to outlast itself for the specific purpose of being known, of having someone arrive eventually and acknowledge you were real, you were here, we know about you now. I thought about a ship called Rotten Luck, parked on the surface of a planet that wanted to kill it. I thought about 4 humans who heard a signal that everyone else had decided not to listen for, and landed and went in and held out a hand. "Commander Eula," I said into my communicator. Gorr, she was still there. She had been there the whole time. The installation is stable, transitioning to preservation mode. The archive is intact and accessible. I need a formal research team, xenoarchaeologists, a xenolinguistics unit, and a structural engineering assessment team. I have already begun the requisition, she said. And Commander, I need you to put in a request with the Galactic Council for official recognition of this site and its occupant as a protected discovery under the Sapient Remains Accord. A very careful pause. Gorr, she said, the accord applies to active sapient life. We do not know for certain that the presence you are describing meets the threshold for, with respect, Commander, I said, it called for help for 800,000 years, and when someone came it moved closer to them. I am comfortable with the classification. Silence. Then filed. Thank you, Commander. Gorfie, she said. Commander, I have been in this division for 32 years, she said. I have never filed a report that I could not fully explain before submitting it. I understand. I am going to file several today. I am aware. I find, she said very slowly, as though the words were being assembled in real time from materials she did not usually use for this purpose, that I do not entirely mind. She disconnected. The chamber held its light steady and even, and the thing on the platform looked at all of us in turn, taking inventory the same way it had when we first entered, but differently now, not noting our presence, noting our staying. Colt Maves finally stood up from his crouch. His knees must have ached. He stood slowly, unhurriedly, and when he was upright, he did not step back. He stayed at the platform edge. He looked at the presence. The presence looked at him. Then he looked at me. "What do we do now?" he said. It was the most words I had heard him say at once, and coming from him, in that voice, in this room, they hit differently than the same words would have coming from anyone else. Now, I said, we wait for the research team. We document what we can in the interim. We make sure the installation stays stable. I paused. And we stay, he repeated. We stay, I said, because it has been alone for 800,000 years, and it was not broadcasting all that time because it wanted to be ignored when someone finally came, and because the first team here should be people who— I stopped, tried again, people who understand that the most important thing is not to leave before it is sure. Sure of what? I did not specify. I did not need to. Everyone in the room knew. The presence on the platform had been sending the same message through the dark for 800,000 years, and the message was not a weapon, and not a warning, and not a distress call, though it had looked like all three from the outside. The message was simpler. The message was, we were here, and we are asking if you are too. And the answer arrived at in a battered ship with a name like an apology and a crew who showed up anyway, was, yes, we are, and we heard you, and we are not going to pretend we did not. Brix came back from the corridor entrance and sat down on the floor with his back against the wall, his arms resting on his knees, in the specific posture of someone settling in for a long wait without complaint. Rook sat next to him. Brix went on recording. Sable stayed cross-legged in front of the platform, and the presence watched her, and the light held, and everything that needed to be said had already been said in the language that works when all the other languages run out. I sat down too. Senior Field Observer, Veth Galactic Enforcement Division, 15 years of protocols and chafing uniforms and maintaining safe distances. I sat down on the floor of an 800,000-year-old archive and looked at something that had been alone longer than my entire civilization had existed, and which was, right now, in this moment, looking back at all of us with eyes the color of steady light. My communicator would go off again later. Many times. There would be reports to file and committees to address, and 32 different species who would have 32 different strong opinions about what this discovery meant and who had the right to be involved and what the protocols should be. There would be paperwork. Commander Eula was not wrong about the paperwork, but right now, in this moment, none of that had happened yet. Right now, in this moment, 6 living things from a planet called Earth and 1 from a planet called Veth were sitting in a room that had been waiting for company for 800,000 years. And it had gotten it. From people who were not supposed to be here, who, as Sable Voss had said very simply on the surface of a planet that wanted to kill her, tended to show up in places like this because they happened to be nearby and they heard something, and that turned out to be enough. It always had been. It always would be. The light held steady. 4 seconds. Then 3. Then a long, even, sustained warmth that filled the whole chamber and did not pulse at all because it did not need to count down anymore. It had arrived.